Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Torres. This is the first time you tune in. You'll want to know that we're hopefully the top consumer goods and retail podcast in Europe. You can check out our website, fmcgguys.com, to find all our over 250 something episodes to date. A lot of good consumer goods and retail leaders that we've spoken with, which, by the way, if you're in the industry, I recommend, and you like what we do, I recommend that you share our content with your colleagues, with your team, even with your friends, potentially, if they have an interest in the industry. So this year, I normally get asked on the podcast, like, is there something that you want to talk about? And I always say, like, there's not really an editorial line, but it is true that one of the areas that I really wanted to cover this year is around growth. That might sound very cliche, but it's around really like, what areas and what companies in the FMCG industry are actually growing and creating value. And I think that in the post-COVID world, it was really like during COVID, the big companies were seeing a lot of growth. I think that the fact that a lot of people were not spending outside made them spend back home. There's an element also of like classic brands make you like feel safe. But I think that now we're going to a trend that we've seen before COVID, which is that there's more like independent, up-and-coming brands that are creating the growth, growing the categories. And today we're speaking with one of them. It's Little Moons, who's disrupting, I would say they're disrupting the ice cream category, but we can ask Ross Farquhar, who's their Marketing, Innovation and Sustainability Director. Hey, Ross, how are you?
Very well, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Would it be the ice cream category you think that you would be competing with?
Well, I define it as snacking, right? Because my target is all about anything that people snack on. And historically, there's been ambient categories, actually, chocolate and biscuits and cake. And ice cream hasn't really lived up to the massive opportunity in snacking. So even though we are primarily on the frozen aisle and actually in the chilled aisle as well. Many of your listeners hopefully will have tried us in sushi kiosks in different countries. I've got my sights set on snacking.
So before we get into the topics, actually, since I didn't do it, can you tell us a bit about Little Moons, what the product looks like? I mean, I invite anyone to like just grab their phone or their computer and Google it as well. But can you describe it?
Or go down to store and buy some. Help my rate of sale wherever you are
that
in the world.
Yeah.
Sure. So Little Moons is, I talk about as the slowest burn overnight sensation in FMCG that you've ever encountered, because it feels to a lot of people like it massively came to prominence about 4 years ago, as I'm sure we'll talk about in a viral boom. But it's actually a business that's been around since 2010. So we're about 15 years old, founded by two siblings, Howard and Vivian Wong, who grew up in their parents' Asian bakery in northwest London, which did include mochi in its product repertoire. So they've quite literally generations of talent in making mochi available to them. But it was when they went traveling around the world and saw this concoction of mochi ice cream that they thought, you know what, that's really exciting. And we think we can do that just as well, if not better, than the ones that we're experiencing. So for those who are not familiar with it, mochi ice cream is a blend of a Japanese traditional product called mochi, which is pounded rice dough. It's like a soft and squishy dough, and then filled with artisan gelato in our case. So some really high quality ice cream. And the output is a delicious, elevated little ball of ice cream in a kind of portion-controlled, bite-sized format that makes it the perfect snack. But we don't just do ice cream. We also do cheesecake and chocolate ganache, so chilled fillings that you might find in a sushi kiosk in a supermarket or a standalone outlet if you're in the UK, places like Wasabi and Itsu, those kind of places.
What kind of feeling do you have when you eat a mochi? Because it is I mean, now it's become a more prominent product, but it is like very unusual, no? Like a dough with an ice cream inside. What does that feel like?
Uh, it's just utter joy, right? I mean, the mochi thing's really interesting. It's like this is a really functionally different product to a lot of people. There's clearly a lot of people who are familiar with mochi from their travels. Perhaps they've been to Japan or Southeast Asia and experienced it in its traditional form, where it tends to be filled with red bean paste. So they might be more familiar with that kind of soft, squishy texture. But what we find in most Western markets is, the mochi is fundamentally a vehicle. And it provides some textural contrast, but ultimately what it's doing is making ice cream or cheesecake or ganache a more snackable, bite-sized, and therefore permissible option with the added textural contrast that is just interesting in your mouth, and we certainly find can't help but make people smile. And even though you might think it's a very functionally different product, so that must be quite polarizing. I mean, we have researched this to the ends of the earth, and it is rejected by far fewer people than you would expect. It literally is more like 1 in 10, maybe 2 in 10 at most who don't like it on trying and aren't open to trying it. It's it's a really wonderful way of making ice cream snackable.
Yeah. It's less polarizing than Marmite, for example.
Completely.
to give you an example, I like Marmite, I have to say, but I know that it's not everybody. So Ross, can you tell me a bit like about your adventure, your career background before getting to this role? Because I know that you did quite a lot of different things.
I did. I've had a very sort of varied career that's gone all over the place, but very happy to have landed where I am. So I started my career about 20 odd years ago in Cadbury, a company that no longer exists. It's now Mondelez, but I joined as a graduate there and sort of moved my way around sales and marketing roles and field sales and category development, but ultimately found myself in brand marketing, working on what I always talk about as every bar apart from dairy milk, or the portfolio was called count lines at the time. So it was, bars that you count by number rather than by weight, which is what molded chocolate tends to be measured by. So that means brands like Wispa, Flake, Crunchy, Wispa Gold. Also was very involved in Cadbury launching their bite-size range of pouches of bites as well. So I was in that business for about 6 years, a wonderful place to start your career and kind of professionally grow up, not just because it was filled with incredibly talented people, but also just trains you. Like, it's a blue chip FMCG that you just get this wonderful training that you may not appreciate at the time, but you look back on very fondly. I ended up leaving Cadbury when Kraft took over the business, when what would ultimately become Mondelez. And I briefly stopped off at Diageo to do a global job on Captain Morgan. And that I think Diageo is a wonderful business and I really adore it. And I thought the people were just as talented and provoking there. But about a few months in, I had the opportunity to make a really big leap, because the ex-marketing director of Cadbury, along with the founders of Fallon, who at the time were kind of the hot agency in the world, they'd made the Drumming Gorilla and the bounced colourful balls down the street for Sony Bravia, and had been winning at Cannes for years. They'd broken away to found a company called 101. And so I had the opportunity to leap agency side, and I spent the next 6-7 years eventually becoming a partner in that business and working on all manner of brands in lots of different sectors, from airline loyalty on Avios for IAG, to property listings with Zoopla, to pensions with Scottish Widows, and lots of food and drink as well, where it's kind of our passion lies. So
can I ask you how was it? Because easier said than done, right? Like going from brand side to agency side, it's a different. There's some transferable skills, but the nature of the work is very different, no? But obviously you liked it because you spent 6 years there. So
yeah, like it's there's definitely a truth that everyone on either side thinks they could do the job on the other side just as well, and it would be a walk in the park. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't go into it, probably with an impression that I'd be pretty decent at it, and then was quickly disabused of that notion when you realise that everything that goes on inside an agency that you don't see as a client, it requires a whole set of skills that you may or may not have developed, right? Like working with and getting the best out of creative people is something that you don't really learn how to do do typically when you're brand or client side. I had a very steep learning curve on that. So very different, but I kind of loved it. And I learned something out of it that would come into my career later, which is I really love the startup environment, the kind of you're sort of congregated at a tiny makeshift office, just trying to create something brilliant and to build something. And I love that kind of high growth, high opportunity environment compared to the sort of big blue chip matrixed organizations that I'd been in prior. And I often say to people when they're thinking about going agency side from brand side or vice versa, that divide is actually much less than company size, in my view, i.e. big agencies have a lot more in common with big brand side companies and small agencies have a lot more in common with small brand side companies. So that's the thing that I think that you should get your head around in your career. What sort of environments do you really thrive in most? And I certainly learned from me that small to medium sized businesses with huge growth potential is where I love working. So I did that, and I was part of 101 for almost its entire life until we sold the business to Interpublic Group and were merged into Mullen Lowe. And I took that opportunity to join a big global agency, Grey, part of WPP. I did that for a year, but given what I've just said about really thriving in small to medium-sized, high-growth opportunities, I quickly realised that though I'd made the decision to go to Grey for really solid head-based reasons, my heart wasn't singing in that environment. And so I, after a year, joined Wagamama, a sort of global Pan-Asian restaurant business located in the UK, and became their CMO and had a fantastic year and a half in that business. I love it to bits, its culture, its food. I really love hospitality. I could talk about that for hours, but I won't. But then the pandemic hit. And hospitality went through an existential crisis, and Wagamama was no different to that. So I had no choice but to make a vast swathe of redundancies, particularly in functions like marketing. So I left the business, and it was a big sliding doors moment because I probably would have been there for a long time, but had that redundancy not happened, then I wouldn't have had the opportunity, or might not have had my eyes open to the opportunity that Littleman's represented. And I joined them in 2020. A small business, about 7 million in revenue, as marketing director, a really small team. I think my team was about 3 people at the time. No allocated marketing spend necessarily. I had to sort of prove why all investment would be required. And then over the last 5 years that I've been part of the company, it's been somewhat transformed. We've gone from that 7 million business to about a 60 million pounds one today, gone from being in a small selection of markets to being in 38 different markets, primarily in Europe, Australasia, and the Middle East.
Now,
And it's
now
gone
in
crazy.
hindsight,
So, yeah.
now in hindsight, it's like, oh yeah, of course you joined this business when it's done so well. No, but like at the time when it was still, you said 7 million, so very small, 3 people in the marketing team. What, apart from the fact that you were looking for a job, obviously, but what was in you, or that, or what did you see that you really liked that made you join?
So I think I sort of learned over a fairly varied career what are the conditions for me to thrive in. And I've worked out that there are certain categories that I love, and top of the list is food and drink. It's why I thrive in hospitality and why I thrive on food products in FMCG. And I love ice cream. And it was a category I always wanted to work in because it's my vice of choice. So that factored in, and it was a really distinctive and interesting product that I got quite excited about. I loved the point they were at in their journey because it just felt like there was so much headroom for us to grow into. And I was really excited about being a part of that story. And then the final one is people. I've sort of learned that, the best career decisions I've made have been motivated by the opportunity to work with really talented, lovely people who I'm going to learn from and who I think I could add value to as well. And when I met Howard and Vivian, the founders of the business, I just met people who I really liked and who I was really, really impressed by. And I also thought that they were really open to the input of someone with my kind of background. So I was driven by all of those things into the business, and absolutely no regrets with hindsight.
Is it possible as well that having worked in agency where you cover a lot of ground, you see a lot of brands, a lot of company cultures, Did that also help in terms of like, okay, this type of company I would work, and this type of company I wouldn't?
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, if anything, agency side really opened my eyes to possibilities. I meet a lot of people now. I'm sort of attached to the Marketing Academy, which is an organization that offers a lot of scholarships and mentoring and that kind of thing. So I mentor for them, and I meet a lot of people through that who are sort of growing up in their career through one category, often with one big company, and they have quite a narrow focus on what their career can look like. I look back on the time at 101 and think, the opportunity to work on loyalty and hospitality and financial services and coffee retailers and property listings just meant I sort of learned A, that I really love variety, and B, that the great thing about a marketing career is you build lots of transferable skills, that you are not absolutely restricted to the category in which you learned how to do this. So it sort of builds your confidence as well, that you can do more, you can sort of sit in companies and add value that may not be the sort of home question for you based on your experience. So it definitely did teach me a lot that ultimately led me to Little Moons.
And how were like those first few months at Little Moons? I think there was like quite a big event that kind of turned maybe like the job description and the trajectory you were imagining changed.
Absolutely. So this is where I'm just incredibly lucky. I'd love to claim credit for this, but I'm just incredibly lucky. So, I was working away on my, diligently produced growth plans, the role marketing would play to drive demand, the role media that would play, et cetera, when in January 2021, so you have to picture the scene with this. We were in lockdown 3 in the UK. Everyone was exhausted by lockdowns. It's miserable because it's January and it's the UK, so the weather is terrible and everyone's freezing cold. And literally, legally, the only place you can go is the supermarket. It's the only place you can leave your house to go to, quite literally, and the park maybe, but primarily the supermarket.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah.
Here you couldn't go, even like the first few months, you couldn't even go to the park.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So we're in this space where we're like, everyone is bored to tears. And at the same time, this nascent app on your phone called TikTok is sort of taking off in the UK and people are figuring out how to use it. But content generation's hard when you're very restricted to where you can go and sort of what you can capture. So on a fateful day in late January 2021.
Which you'd been in the company for how long?
Gosh, I'd officially joined, I think, in the September. So okay. Just over a quarter, really.
And you also did that onboarding, that virtual onboarding.
Yeah, a lot. I did a lot. I mean, I first met my team entirely virtually, and I think I probably made it into the office, our factory in Northwest London, maybe 3 times. I remember like unpacking stuff into my desk, and then by the time all of the lockdowns were over, everyone had thrown my stuff out because actually, as we'll come on to, we went through a huge boom in demand as a result of TikTok. So, late January, someone posted on TikTok a video of themselves going in big Tesco in search of Little Moons. And they filmed themselves to a trending track, going in, finding the product, scanning it, going back to their car, tasting it, and giving it a 10 out of 10 rating. I think it was wonderful. And then lots of other people started replicating this very easy to replicate format. Go into store, try the product, rate it, same trending track. And after 500 million views of these videos, the business was completely transformed. Like, we'd never seen demand like it. The product couldn't sort of stay on the shelves, and we were just scrabbling to produce enough product to meet demand. And you kind of have to bear in mind at this point, we were only listed in Tesco, Waitrose, Ocado, Whole Foods. So we were still at that point in our journey, as is often the case with young food companies, you're sort of incrementally growing the brand with every listing in every market. And we'd been struggling to get into some of the other ones. But we went through this incredible boom that meant our sales increased 2,000% over the space of about a week. Every other retailer was banging our door down to list us, including retailers in lots of other markets and distributors. Mm. We were just desperately working day and night to produce as much stock as we could, though as a marketer, I have to say scarcity can sometimes be your friend in driving up perceived value. But I have sympathy with my
sales
operations colleagues who might not appreciate me saying that. And by the end of the year, we were listed in every supermarket in the UK, expanding rapidly into other markets, really dramatically increasing our capacity. We actually went on TV for the first time that year because even though demand was huge, we were very conscious that we couldn't allow this thing to become a fad. So we sort of sent out a signal of intent that this brand was kind of here to stay by starting to support it with paid media. And then we went from there, and the business was completely transformed, as I say.
Yeah, I mean, it's like joining a team as a manager as they're winning the Champions League, no? And then the expectation is that you'll win the Champions League every year. How have you were mentioning like investing on TV to like kind of consolidate the brand and
Absolutely.
not make it a fad. How have you managed? Because getting something right on TikTok, and I know that you don't take credit for that. There's a big element of luck to it, but then to maintain that's when like good decisions come in. How have you done it to keep? I mean, you're still in the business, so I guess that you've done something right?
That's true. Yeah, exactly. That's the acid test. Look, I always say we weren't responsible for that. It was the kind of would-be influencer who did it. But I will take some credit on behalf of my team for and for the people in the business for capitalizing on the opportunity well. And we did a few things. So firstly, TikTok is now part of our folklore. We've been an early adopter of TikTok. It's been a hugely important channel for us for all of the years since this happened, and it will continue to be so. So we've really sort of leaned in and adopted that heavily. We've coupled that with significant paid media investment because the reality is the ice cream category has some huge global power brands in it who spend heavily in media in all of the markets that we're operating in. So if we want to compete, then we need to support the brand and make it a habitual purchase for people. But then we also recognize, the reason I knew this wouldn't be a fad and that I was so confident in it was that I think there's a genuine category story here. And I alluded to it up front about how snacking is booming. We are all snacking more and more. But we typically have a snack cupboard or a snack drawer. It's ambient products like chocolate or biscuits and cakes that we snack on.
The pantry, no?
Yeah, totally. So, I thought there was a genuine category narrative here because the ice cream category has been stuck in basically sticks and tubs for decades and decades. And this is a genuine piece of innovation in Little Moons that had the opportunity to help ice cream become a really major player in snacking. So we invested heavily in category data and in category management talent to take the story to retailers that frozen snacking is a real genuine incremental opportunity. And that's also been a big enabler of our success in both the UK and in our other key markets.
Yeah, because what does the business look like today in terms of size and where you are distributed as well?
So as I say, about 60 million in revenue these days. We're in 38 different markets. The UK is still the biggest, but the international business as a whole is bigger than the UK. We're the number one mochi brand in over 10 of those markets. There are other competitors, but we're the sort of fastest growing outside the US and the biggest. So it's a really big business now by comparison to the one that I joined. Germany is a really fast growing market for us and there's huge opportunity there. Australia is a really strong market for us as well. We're now available in effectively 2/3 of the grocery channel because we're in Woolworths and Coles. Middle East is big. France is big. There's just so much headroom in all of these markets because even though they're sizable for us, we're still only commanding, we're the 8th biggest ice cream brand in the UK, but we're about 2.4% share of the category, and that's our biggest one. So there's just so much room to grow and to grow the ice cream category in each of these markets.
Totally. And out of curiosity, when you joined and you were working on a plan, mid-long term plan to build a brand, and then this sudden TikTok trend comes in and basically you have to change the strategy basically, and it just transforms the business apps totally. Did that change your your way of being a marketer, if that makes sense? Did it change your perspective on marketing?
I genuinely no, and for a couple of reasons. It didn't change our strategy, it just accelerated it. I sort of make it akin to like, if it's snakes and ladders, then you've just hit a ladder and you've managed to skip half the board to where you need to be. But luckily, like one of the benefits of my career is I've worked for small brands and medium brands and big brands, and actually the fundamentals are still pretty similar. It's just the tactics you use that might change. So, the reality for any brand is that penetration is almost always the right goal to be going after. And the way that you grow penetration is some blend of distribution, innovation, and media investment. And just the way that you play those notes is going to vary according to where the brand's maturity level is in any given market. So, obviously, helped by the fact that I've had that grounding in other bigger businesses. Also helped by the fact that I've been through virality once before, which is a really weird thing to happen twice in your career. But back
What
when
was
I
the
was
first one?
back at Cadbury in about 2008, Whisper was brought back because of this little nascent platform called Facebook, where people were congregating to demand that Cadbury brought back their beloved Whisper bar. And while I wasn't part of the very initial sort of limited edition return of it, I was part of the permanent return, and it became the number one chocolate bar. So I've kind of been through that consumer-driven feedback loop that completely transforms a business or a brand. And I look back on the Whisper experience and go, we got some things right and some things wrong, but I learned loads from it, and hopefully I was able to apply that to Little Wins. And to give you an example of that, I remember, we were very nervous at Cadbury of almost spoiling the phenomenon through paid media when it was so organically generated. But I'm not sure that was entirely the right thing to do in retrospect. And we deployed with Little Moons a view that actually paid media is not in opposition to an organic consumer-driven trend. It can be the amplifier in some ways. So we put a little bit of paid media on TikTok at the peak of the TikTok boom, and it gave it a second wind and made it even bigger and got it in front of a whole load more people. And so actually some of the lessons I had from before really helped us in making the most of making the biggest leap that we could in that short space of time into, it's just fundamentally a different league.
Which is interesting, no? Because it does bring me to this debate that is now in the marketing community between brand building versus performance marketing, no? It's pretty much in that. Do you have a position around it?
Yeah, I don't see the binary in the same way that I think the industry tends to. And I know it's a fairly common answer, but it's genuine from me. My perspective on this is the brand just needs to behave in interesting ways, and you need to use media to influence the shopper journey by shining a light on that interesting behavior in the right way at each point. So to give you a practical example of that, the way we think about our communications is generally in three categories: being seen and heard, being talked about, and being bought. So being seen and heard is where your kind of traditional media comes in, because it has huge benefits of reaching lots and lots of people in a cost-effective way. Being talked about is where TikTok and creator tends to come in, because it for a product that is so distinctive and functionally different as Little Moons, it's really helpful to have an element of social proof for you to be hearing around your network that these things are great and you should try them. So that's why TikTok is so absolutely critical to us. And then being bought is how you just nudge people over the line at that very tail end of the point of purchase, typically when they're in store or they're nearing a buying situation. So you could try and divide those channels out into which ones are being used at the top, middle, and bottom of the funnel, and which ones are brand building and performance building. But I just don't, those aren't the distinctions I primarily see. I primarily see at what point in the journey are we trying to influence people, and what's the best stimulus and the best channel to do that.
There's a new trend that I've also heard about lately, which is like experiential marketing, like more like real life experiences with the brand. What do you think around that?
Experientials. Oh gosh, I think we've done experiential work in almost every brand that I've worked on. I think in Little Moon's case, we've sort of recognized that tasting is believing if you're new to this product. And so we have historically invested quite heavily in what I talk about is kind of good sampling or brand-centric sampling. So perhaps it's not as experiential as the kind of event that a Nike or an Apple are doing, but we are just making sure that we're not just sort of turning up with a cart and giving you a product. So, we'll be at festivals, we will turn up in ice cream trucks, we will do PR stunts that give us a ton of coverage and a ton of sampling opportunity. I mean, I love that in Australia we've done work like the world's littlest ice cream parlour, which is quite genuinely tiny. It sits behind my desk now in the UK. So we'll do lots of sort of brand-centric, interesting pieces of brand behaviour that give us the opportunity to get lots of, as we talk about it, as mochi in mouths. And the best kinds of those are hybrids that are partly about sampling, partly about real world experiences, and partly about opportunities to create content that then can travel much further on a platform like TikTok, where we're always trying to hit all three of those things in any experiential work that we do.
Yeah, but I guess that's like, if you do one of these experiences, then there's like user generated content that come from them and then they publish it on TikTok, on Instagram or whatnot, no?
Exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's creating those brand experiences that can potentially just build a brand, but potentially also create another viral moment like the ones you've had before, no?
Yeah, or at very least getting you talked about. Like I always say, in every market, I will say to you, trying to go viral is not a strategy. It's a wonderfully fortunate thing if it happens to you, but it's not something to be relied upon. So we just, most of the activity tends to sit in the sort of be talked about frame, where you're like, if you want to be talked about, then you have to behave in interesting ways and give people the stimulus that they genuinely want to post about on their own platforms. And of course, you can do things to help with that, like have paid creator relationships and also sort of send out product to people who already love the brand and all that kind of stuff. And we do it all, but fundamentally the idea at the heart of it is critical. Otherwise, if you put yourself in their shoes, why are you expecting them to post about this thing? It's not just that you've invited them to a party, right?
And I guess there could be a risk also of burning the brand if you just bury, and people would probably see, if you were really like looking to just create viral moments somehow.
Yeah, there has to be coherence to the whole thing. I mean, this is where my team and my business are sometimes bored by me, because I do come from that sort of Cadbury-esque background where it's really important to know what your positioning is, really important to know what your reasons to believe are, and whatever your sort of choice of tool, brand onions, brand pyramids, brand keys, all of them. Really at the heart of it is just like, what is the very brief summary of how you want to position this brand in people's hearts and minds, and what are the reasons that you can offer that substantiate that make it true. For us, it's all about having these kind of elevated treats in small packages, the kind of really delicious product, but then in a small permissible package that then plays into multiple macro trends. There's partly about sort of really high caliber taste experiences. There's a snacking trend. There's permissible indulgence, and then there's also, frankly, like interest in ethnic food. So we position ourselves across all of those things and just make sure that everything we do in every single channel feels coherent to that positioning.
Which is smart also, because these are categories, and there's not many of them, categories that are growing. And I know that the big supermarket chains in Europe have like a strategic bet on like ethnic foods, for example.
Absolutely. And in certain countries, hugely interesting. And look, people who are particularly open-minded or curious about ethnic foods do tend to be our early adopters, and they're wonderful. So, I think one of the reasons we're enjoying such success in Germany is there is huge cultural interest in Asian cuisine in that market. That is fantastic. And then our challenge becomes, how do you break out of that early adoption phase into the mainstream and into habitual purchase? Because even though someone might be hooked on the kind of intrigue of, so it's soft rice dough from Japan, but with gelato in the middle of it, they fundamentally still need to see the value and the role that this brand plays in their lives and the moments that they should think of it. The Byron Sharp category entry point stuff.
And that's an interesting thing of like the product that you offer, that it's like it's like the quirkiness or the exoticism of having that dough outside, but the gelato inside is actually like really high quality, right?
Absolutely. Like very ingredient led. We're like really high standards. Not a lot of air in our product. Like all of that stuff is absolutely critical to us because the taste experience is crucial. And like when I think about it's really important to our founders, Howard and Vivian. Like Vivian has deep connections with high-end hospitality, and actually Little Moon's history is tied up with places like Nobu and Sushi Samba. The chef at Nobu actually was very involved in some of the original recipes. So quality is like something, when I talk about reasons to believe, there are genuine reasons to believe Little Moon's is a really elevated product.
How important is data in your job? And I guess that when it comes to like innovate, when it comes to insights, when it comes also to, execute and decide to invest in X number of channel, what channel you invest in and so on.
So the data is critical, don't get me wrong, but it's there to inform your judgment, not to make decisions for you. And personally, I frame it more as empathy. So I just need to be really connected to and empathetic with the consumers that I'm trying to reach across all of the markets that I'm talking to. And sometimes the best way to do that is through hard data to see what's going on in the market, through EPOS data or through quant brand tracking or segmentations that we do. And we absolutely do all of those, and they are hugely helpful. But they are also sitting next to just deep conversations with people, whether in organized forms like focus groups, do lots of those, or more ad hoc stuff. I mean, I still love just going to store wherever I am in the world and sort of standing and watching people in aisles in a hopefully not that creepy way, going, how do people just like shop this fixture? And what do they say to each other? And so like some of the best leaps come from that. And then the other thing is social listening. Like social listening is a really critical part of our brand, because it gives us a real sense of what people are talking about and what they're looking for, and the trends that are coming up. Like we're a really trend forward flavor brand. So whether it's sort of jumping on the golden blonde chocolate trend very early, or the brown butter trend that's now coming out. We've just launched our brown butter caramel products because if you are at all into bake talk on TikTok, you'll find that basically everything must include brown butter at the moment. So social listening is a really big part of how we develop the brand as well.
Has technology made it easier to get these like qualitative insights, or is it,
Yeah, it has. Like, I mean, social listening is the best example of that, right? Like, even with AI now, you can, with the right prompts, just go and trawl through Reddit or trawl through some of the social platforms that are open and tell me what's going on in certain contexts. And that is really valuable. Don't get me wrong. And we use, social media platforms that allow us to do more formal social listening as well. All I'd say is it's not just a replacement for either being in store or being in the company of the people that you want to talk to. I mean, just before recording this, I was in Sainsbury's because I wanted to go out on a Friday afternoon and just spend a little bit of time staring at the fixture in the middle of a heat wave and watching people go up. And that's just as valuable to me as spending an afternoon staring at the EPOS data in an Excel spreadsheet.
Interesting. I didn't ask you, by the way, like another part of your role is marketing, obviously, and also innovation. What does that part of the role look like?
I love innovation. Like it's like my soul food working on it, because these are categories, ice cream, snacking categories, and so on, that do run on the new. So, shoppers really do just expect new news regularly and regular churn. And it's not
it's like your staples, and then like
exactly
an assortment
right? In the same way that if you work for Coca-Cola, you're incredibly proud of Red Coke and Coke Zero and Diet Coke, but you're constantly rotating in interesting flavors and variations on that. Ice cream is no different. Magnum does this all the time. And it means that we're constantly working not just on new flavors, but on new formats that are going to expand the sort of snacking presence in the frozen aisle, so that we're genuinely competing with those other categories. But yeah, so we've got brown butter caramel coming out this year, which I'm really excited about. Last year, we launched our frozen cheesecakes product, which is absolutely delicious. The strawberry and mascarpone one is just incredible. We obviously would say that, but I genuinely do believe it. The year before that, we launched our Refreshos product, which is our sorbets product, which is
Nice.
compliant with UK high fat, salt, sugar legislation, which is a whole other topic. But just means that even though Little Moons are light in and of themselves, they're typically less than 80 calories per bite. Refreshos are even lower because they're sorbet products. So lots and lots of innovation delivered and in the pipeline, and it's often the kind of best blue sky moments in my job.
What should we be expecting from you guys? I mean, it's been quite a ride now since you joined. What should we be expecting from you guys in the next couple of years?
So obviously I won't give away specifics because that would be incredibly valuable to my competitors. But what I will say is, like, our entire category approach is about building snacking presence in ice cream and building out that part of the fixture. We're sort of fortunate that lots of competitors have recognized the opportunity as well and are moving in with their own forms of innovation. But our attitude is the tide rises for all. So that's not a bad thing. And we just need to be really focused on the moments that matter for consumers. We've done a lot of work on sort of segmenting day parts and when people are typically snacking most often, and then the kind of product formats and packaging formats and so on that really work with those occasions. So we've got lots of irons in fires, but they're all about making Little Moons a big global snacking brand across the store and in different channels as well, not just restricted to 6 packs of frozen mochi ice cream.
Very exciting. So Ross, we have this question that we ask all our guests. It's a easy one to answer, I think, which is, if you went back to the beginning of your career as you were starting at Cadbury's, what would be that one piece of advice? And you've given a few actually during the conversation, but if they had to be only one advice you would give yourself, what would it be?
I love thinking about this question. So I would tell my younger self to be more opportunistic. And I sort of referred to it a little bit earlier, but the thing about growing up in a big blue chip FMCG is it gives you the most incredible grounding in the fundamentals of how brands are built and managed, but it can really narrow your vision of what a successful, fulfilling career looks like. And I can honestly say that when I took the leap into startup agency world, it opened my eyes to a world of opportunities across categories and different sizes of business and types of marketing leadership roles that I'm so grateful to have had, because it's meant I've had a really varied career so far, and long may it continue. And it's also given me the confidence to go, those marketing skills really are transferable. So if you have a passion out there that isn't necessarily the category you're working in or the type of business you're working in, don't be afraid to take the leap, because your skills are valuable, and there's so much out there that it is going to be fun and fulfilling for you to work on.
Agreed. Nothing more to add. So I'll try to summarize quickly the conversation that we've had. I liked how you called Little Moons the slowest burn overnight sensation since 2010. That when you think about it, it is 15 years ago. But yeah, I mean, the accelerations that it's had in the last years has been amazing. Your career trajectory, and based on like the advice that you were giving, look, I think it takes some courage, right? Not everybody would leave a Cadbury. Well, no, sorry, Diageo at the time. First of all, not everyone is ready to leave a business after 6 years, because that's when they're in the comfort zone, and everybody tells them they're amazing. So sometimes you have to like say, okay, this is great, but let me accelerate my career. And then taking the other leap, going into agency. What type of crazy person would do that? But obviously, you did well in it. More than 6 years in agency between one and the other. I think that you've been able like to learn a lot, and then to bring like all the experience that you've had to Little Moons, where the role that you started in after 6 months was completely different. Well, not completely different. The fundamentals were the same, but the dimension and the scale and the speed was completely different. But I think that with the experience that you had, you saw an underlying pattern. You'd seen a viral moment already. And I think what's very interesting is what you said, like during the viral moment, that's when you have to like really think of like, okay, this is great, but let's make the right investment so that the brand still has recurrence, and it's not only betting everything on that moment. In terms of like the business where it is now, you joined in over 7 million. Now it's 60 million, 38 markets, the number one mochi brand. And yeah, Germany, Australia, fast growing markets. Obviously, the UK is your main market still. But yeah, I think we'll see more and more coming out of it. In terms of performance marketing and brand building, you were very clear. You don't see a binary. It's more about like showing up in the right way. And I think you didn't say it like that, but I think it's being consistent with what your brand is, what you stand for. No, I think you mentioned like an elevated snack is like the thing that you're looking for most. And I think there is also an element of like happiness, no, associating that moment of indulgence, if you like, right?
Joyful.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of data, you mentioned that it's there to inform judgment, not take decisions. That's a great one. And you talked about empathy with the consumer as well. So, and by the way, if anyone sees you in a supermarket, there'll be a question if you're shopping or if you're like seeing how your brand is doing.
I'm listening. I'm spying. Careful what you say if you see me down the frozen aisle.
No, but that's a great one, I think. But I think that sometimes we associate marketing and innovation with being in a bit of an ivory tower.
Yeah.
And I think that just being on the ground, seeing what your brand is doing is a great one. So thanks so much, Ross. I had a blast, I have to say. On a Friday afternoon, had a great time.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again. And thanks to our audience for tuning in. And we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG Guys. Have a great one.